Laura Stinson. Thank you so much for being super patient with me. Thank you so much for making it work. I appreciate it. So we're gonna start squared away. I know you're a
Okay.
busy woman, so I'm gonna read your bio and then
Okay.
kick off. Does that sound good
All
with
right. Sounds good.
you? Okay, awesome. So Laura Stinson is a disabled artist, entrepreneur, and advocate based in Charlotte, North Carolina. She's the founder of FairyNerdy, a bold, sarcastic, and feminist art brand known for stickers, tees, and pins that fuse pop culture with disability pride. I'm excited to learn more about that. So, born with a genetic condition and a lifelong wheelchair user, Laura brings humor, grit, and honesty to her work, including her podcast, Bad Attitudes, an uninspiring podcast about disability, where she unpacks ableism with wit and truth. Through art and storytelling, she challenges stereotypes and builds community for disabled and non-disabled folks alike. Follow her at FairyNerdy and at Bad Attitudes Pod. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
First of all, what sparked that idea of for FairyNerdy, and how has your identity as a disabled artist shaped its evolution over time?
Well, I've always been an arty person. I've been drawing since I could hold a pencil. It's always been very important to me. Um, but it took me a while to sort of realize I could do it like for a job. You don't realize that the things you love can actually be a job until you do. Um, Everybody thinks that the name is some like huge creative thing. Honestly, I'm a huge nerd and I love fairies, and that's where it came from. Like it's not complicated. Being a disabled artist is interesting because I get a lot of, "Oh, you made all this. You did." Yeah, I did it. And actually, it's really been a big conversation recently. People have been talking a lot about AI as a assistive tool for disability or for disabled artists, and I'm here to tell you that's not the case. Generative AI is theft. I will die on that hill. Disabled artists do not need AI to create. They've been creating for centuries without AI. So yeah, it's become a much bigger conversation with the development of AI.
Yeah. So you describe your work as nerdy, sarcastic, and feminist. What does that actually mean to you in practice, not just branding?
In practice, it means that I'm inspired by the things that I love. So that could be TV shows, movies, books, um, like specific titles, or just in general. Like, I think for a long time, nerd was a derogatory term. It was meant to bring us down. And it's become much more mainstream now because everybody is nerdy about something, whether that's books or music or art or whatever. We all have something that we're passionate about. And I think that's really what it's about for me is just being able to express what you're passionate about. Maybe that's a fandom of some sort, or maybe it's, just a general, like, I'm a huge bookworm. So, I'm very passionate about books. Sarcasm is, I mean, it's my brand of comedy. I love sarcasm. I think it's so fun and it's the thing I love about it is like people are never really sure if you're being funny or you're being mean, and I'm never going to clear it up for them. So that's really important to me. And also, the feminist thing, it probably would be more apt to say liberal. I'm very left leaning, I'm very progressive in my politics, and that shows in my work. I don't shy away from those opinions. I don't I don't sugarcoat it. I talk about it in my art and on my podcast very much how the political climate is affecting the disabled community, and not just the disabled community but as a woman, it's very dangerous. I have friends who are members of the LGBTQ plus community they're in danger. All minorities, all marginalized communities are in danger. And it's very important to me to be that inclusive space to, so people feel welcome.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you. And I'm sure there are lots of people that appreciate your advocacy with sass, right?
I hope so.
Who or what gave you your first quote unquote bad attitude? And how did that lead to the voice behind your podcast?
Oh, wow. um, well, the thing about the bad attitudes is there's this saying that disabled people hear a lot, and it's the only disability in life is a bad attitude. I'm sure you've heard it. We've all heard it, and it's just crap. It's utter crap. That's not how it works. And I think the thing that gets me most is people expect disabled people to be. There's a certain expectation to be happy and sort of grateful for whatever we can get. And I have always felt not that, to put it bluntly. I'm not a happy go lucky person. I am a moody artist. I just don't believe in pretending to have feelings or emotions that I don't. I don't believe in pretending to be happy when I'm not. I think there is an element of toxic positivity to being disabled where people are like, you just got to look on the bright side. Well, sometimes there's not a bright side to look on. Sometimes it's just bad. And so I think that's my motivation is to just like to be honest. Like things are not always good and pretending they're good doesn't make them good.
Hmm. Yeah. And being, as authentic as we can in each moment.
Exactly. Exactly.
And and yet there is that balance, right?
Mm,
Of perhaps overall optimism
yeah.
versus um, being real and
Yeah.
honest with our feelings in the moment
Yeah.
to moment.
I consider myself a cynical idealist. Like I believe like there is a possibility for that bright future, but I'm also very realistic about where we are right now and like I just don't have a lot of I mean for lack of a better word faith in humanity. Like humanity continually lets us down and and if I have my faith in humanity restored, that's a big deal. If I see something good, that's a big deal to me. And I think it's important to recognize, exactly what the limitations are of humanity and exactly and to not put people on a pedestal like just because they seem to be nice or they seem to be doing something good. It's that saying the proof is in the pudding. Like when I actually see the results, then maybe I'll start to believe in it a little more.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, and even so, you try to do your part, right? With your,
Right. Mhm.
uh, what did you say earlier? Idealist,
A cynical idealist. Yeah.
cynical idea. So, with that in mind, how do you balance educating non-disabled folks while also creating work that centers, uh, and nourishes, your own community, our own communities?
Um. Well, but my primary goal with the podcast was not necessarily. I mean, I wanted to educate people, but it wasn't my primary goal. My primary goal was to give the disabled community a voice that actually reflected the way we feel. Um, Too many times we get those people who are, you know, inspiring, and I use air quotes because I don't, that word is so overused for the disabled community in general. We are not all inspiring. Not everything we do is inspiring. That's why the tagline of the podcast is an uninspiring podcast about disability. I wanted it to be a more realistic reflection of what we experience as disabled people on a day to day basis. Um, Obviously, I want people to, or non disabled people specifically, to come away with a better understanding of what it means to be disabled. But I also know no amount of listening to my podcast is really going to make them understand what it's like. You can never truly understand what it means to be disabled until you're disabled yourself. Now, if you have someone in your life who is disabled, someone you're close with, be it a partner or a family member or a friend, you can gain some understanding. But you're never going to really know what it's like until you're in that position yourself. So, the main thing I want non disabled people to learn is to listen to the voices of disabled people. When we speak up, when we say, this is a problem, don't argue with us. Just be like, okay, this is a problem. How can we fix it?
Mhm. Yeah, and you're right. They're never, people. I'm a manual wheelchair user as well, and I agree with you. They're never going to fully understand
Mm-hmm.
and the you know multi-dimensional perspective of being us, of having the
Exactly.
specific disabilities we have. Although the efforts are appreciated, right? Listening
Yeah,
to your
like
podcast.
absolutely. And I mean, and I say this with love, like even my parents who obviously have been here my whole life and have, been very instrumental in me getting to where I am, there is still a disconnect simply because they don't experience what I experience. They are as close as you can get to understanding without actually being disabled. But there is still a disconnect, and that's just a reality.
Yeah, I could totally relate to that point with my family. I have a family of five, and my parents and my two brothers, they don't have disabilities either. And you're right, there is that disconnect that there's just, even though we've known each other for decades, been in our lives all these decades, there are just certain aspects of our lives that you just need the lived experience for.
Yeah. And I mean, and it goes both ways. Like, obviously, I'm not a parent. I don't know what it means to be a parent. I can only observe it from the outside. So, it goes both ways. But I just think it's important to note that because a lot of people will say, well, I work with disabled people or I took a class. Well, you don't know anything. Sorry. You just don't. You don't. That doesn't mean you're an expert. It means you read a textbook. It means you interacted a little bit with some disabled people. It doesn't mean you know what it means to be disabled.
Mhm, mhm. Have you ever been surprised positively or negatively by how people respond to your art or your podcast?
I am always positively surprised when people get excited by my art. Um, because it's all, you know, there's such a fine line when you're doing it as a living because you want to make things that will sell, obviously. But at the same time, it's like I don't make art for the purpose of other people. I make it for myself. I make it because, something has excited me and, an idea has blossomed. Um, so I'm always positively excited, enthused, however you want to, when someone is like, I love this. This is so, it's the best because mostly I sell online. But I do a few shows every year. And so like getting that instant feedback when somebody sees like a sticker or something and they're like, oh my God, this is perfect. Like that's such a good feeling. Like because a lot of times, and you'll hear this from writers a lot, creating art of any kind really is like you're in a vacuum. You're creating it alone. You're by yourself. You're doing it. You don't really get any feedback until it's out in the world. So that's always an amazing thing. I've had both positive and negative responses to the podcast. Mostly positive. Very grateful. People, are like, I really like that you don't sugarcoat things. They appreciate my humor. That's always very rewarding because honestly, when I started, I never could have imagined that I would have gone. I just celebrated the 4 year anniversary. It just dropped recently the 150th episode. Like, I thought maybe I would do 30 episodes and then give up. And like, to have kept going is so amazing to me. Um, the negative responses, I have this saying that's like, if you're not pissing someone off, you're doing it wrong. So I don't put too much stock in the negative responses. Um, I do if they're trying to actually educate, like if they're saying something that I think, I'll take it into consideration. But generally speaking, the negative responses come from people who are just ignorant or who just, like, they didn't listen to what I was actually saying. They put some spin of their own on it. So, so I'm very grateful that it's mostly been positive. And the art thing has always been positive. I've never had any super negative reviews of my art. That would probably crush me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And at the same time, it's a great reminder to say, we can't please everyone, right?
Exactly.
Revisiting the topic of, feeling misunderstood, not only with people that are outside of, our community, right? Outside of,
Mhm.
uh, people who don't have disabilities. Um, let's revisit the topic of being misunderstood within our community, though. Have you ever felt harmed or misunderstood by your own community? And what did that experience teach you about belonging or boundaries?
Um, so the one thing that comes to mind, way back when, a million years ago, right after I graduated from college, I had the opportunity to write a monthly column for my local newspaper. And I wrote pretty much exclusively about disability issues. And then, and a lot of the response I got from that was, well, you're just bitter. And, well, I only had 12 columns to tell you all these things. So in response to that, I wrote this one. It's very sarcastic, very on brand for me. And it was like, all the great things about being a wheelchair user. And it was like really stupid stuff. Like I said something like, whenever I go through a crowd, it's like parting the Red Sea and I'm the queen and, very like tongue in cheek. And another person who I think was around the same age as me, early 20s, um, sent me a message and she was also a wheelchair user and she was just like so offended. Like that I would never think that these people that I was their queen. And I just sent her back a message like, I think you missed my point. Because honestly, I was like, I didn't really understand where she was coming from because it was very clearly like tongue in cheek satire, sarcasm. Like I shared it with a couple of other people who aren't local to me, so they don't get the paper. And I was like, did I did I miss something? Was this not as obvious as I think it was? And they're like, no, it's super obvious you're not being serious. Um, and so I don't know. That's the one thing that comes to mind because I'm just like, why do you take yourself so seriously? I think that's not all the disabled community does that, but I think that's a problem just in general. Disabled or not, like just don't take yourself too seriously. It's not that serious.
What did that experience teach you? And how did it make you change about how you set your boundaries?
I didn't really change anything because I was already at the point of believing, if you're not pissing someone off, you're doing it wrong. I think it just made me realize it was sort of the start of my journey to realizing that not all disabled experiences are the same. Um, I didn't know many other disabled people when I was growing up. I was almost always the only disabled kid in my school. I was the only disabled kid in the room, kind of thing. Well, visibly disabled. I'm not gonna say that there weren't like invisible disabilities that I just didn't know about, but you know what I'm saying. Like it just, I was very obviously the only one who looked different. Um, so for most of my life, I thought my experience was the disabled experience. I didn't know just like the vast spectrum of disability that existed. And even into my 20s, I was still very much a singular disabled person. There wasn't, I think there was, on my college campus, I think there was two other disabled people that I know of. One was a wheelchair user, one was blind. But we didn't cross paths because we weren't in the same programs. Um, so it took me a long time to learn, oh, there's a lot of variety in disabled experiences. Even people who have the same genetic condition I do, the variety of experience is huge. And that was a huge learning thing for a huge learning experience for me to be like, oh, disability isn't always obvious. Oh, disability isn't always, I think something that really amazed me was how hard it is for some people to get a diagnosis. Um, that really hit home with me. My sister has an autoimmune disorder, and it took so long for her to get a real diagnosis. And, that I realized I was very privileged for most of my life having actually exceptional medical professionals on my team. So I realized that was a privilege. But that particular moment was a starting point for that learning experience for me.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that because, you're right, it is a process getting to know. Um, I feel like getting to know other people's perspectives because I think when I was younger too, even now I'm still learning that we're each of our experiences are very different. Our perspectives are very different, and how we interpret our using the five senses, using um, our emotions to interpret what's in our environment uh, is all very, very different. Anyways, I feel like I'm not elaborating it very clearly, so let me move on.
No, I mean, you're right. It's all very different. It's informed by how we were raised. It's informed by how we grew up, where we grew up, the kind of educational environment we came from. I realized that in all those respects, I was very privileged.
Mm,
So yeah, it's a huge difference.
yeah, yeah. Um, so let's move on to another topic in terms of capitalism. Well, you touched on it
Okay.
earlier a little bit. How do you think capitalism complicates your relationship with authenticity, both as an artist and as a disabled entrepreneur?
Um, yeah. Living in late stage capitalism is interesting. Because, like I said, I'm very left leaning, very liberal in my politics. Nobody is going to confuse me for some sort of conservative right wing anything. Um, and I am very aware of, as a business owner, I mean, I have bills to pay. I, have to live my life, and that requires money. And in order to get that money, I have to, sort of, like I say, feed the capitalist machine. I have to be productive. I have to, market. I have to do all these things. And it's very complicated as an artist who wants to create, like Like they're, I just want to make stuff and I want people to buy it. I don't want it to be complicated. But it is. And then, of course, as a disabled person, it's even more complicated because, living in a disabled body requires a different perspective. We can't be, I mean, nobody can be productive 100% of the time. You're going to crash out. But I think being disabled, that happens more. It happens more often. You have to be more aware of it. Um, and it's such a complicated thing because I can see the negative impacts of capitalism, but I still have to participate in it in order to live. Like you just can't stop.
Yeah, it's just become such an integrated part of our society.
Yeah,
It's really difficult and seemingly impossible to disentangle.
yeah. I mean, it is um until we recognize that people have value regardless of their ability to be productive, regardless of their ability to work. We can't. And, like I say, we're living in late stage capitalism. It's, whether that happens in our lifetime, I don't know, but it is spiraling to an end because it's just not working. It doesn't work the way well, it it works the way it's supposed to, which is people like us, we work ourselves to death and the rich get richer. But it doesn't work the way it's advertised to work. It's not until companies, corporations, and billionaires finally say, okay, this is too much. We need to redistribute wealth. We need to, give people a living wage instead of expecting them to work three jobs and still not be able to make ends meet. Um, until that happens, we really are stuck on a hamster wheel, I think,
Mhm.
which is so depressing. But
Yeah, I mean, society is always evolving technology. We got AI that's coming into the scene more and more prevalently. So the variables there are also increasing as well. So maybe with the development of artificial general intelligence, there will be some solutions further down the line.
maybe I have complicated feelings about AI as an artist, and I touched on that earlier as well. Like I just, it's AI is AI has so much potential to be beneficial to society, but the problem is the people powering and running AI, they want to use it, to do like it's it's like they want to use it for the wrong things. They want to use it for the creative aspects of humanity rather than the mundane aspects of humanity. Like somebody said, I want AI to do my laundry so that I have time to do things that I love. But I feel like AI is being driven to take away the things that we love, the creative aspects, making music, making art, writing. Um, it's being driven in that direction
Yeah,
as
perhaps.
opposed to
Yeah, no, I definitely
yeah,
get what you're saying. And I think that could definitely perhaps be a topic that you could cover on your bad attitudes
yep, absolutely.
podcast, something uh, that you can really dig deep into. Let's pivot back to your art, though. I wanted to
Okay.
ask you, what's something you've created that scares you because of how honest or raw it was?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, so I don't know if I've ever been scared of something I created. I think I think sometimes so I have my fairy nerdy stuff, but I also have a shop for the podcast, which is specifically merch for disabled people, chronically ill, that sort of thing. And I think the stuff I create for that, where it's specifically touching on disabled topics, and chronically ill topics, topics for those communities, I think that gives me a little more pause where I'm like, did I go too far? But then I'm like, no, because I know disabled people who feel like this, who, like, I'm pissed off about being disabled. Like, there's a design, I haven't released it yet, but it's gonna say inspiration porn star, which, like, if you don't know what inspiration porn is, you could take that way out of context and it could be something really unsavory, I guess would be a good word. Um, but for people who know what inspiration porn is, it's obviously sort of a dig at that type of media. Um, I will say I did create some stuff in the wake of the Uvalde school shooting, um, that was quite angry and anti-gun. And I mean, I don't want to like tiptoe around it. Like, I'm anti-gun. We need to take the guns. Like, there's too many guns. Um, but oh, the Second Amendment. So in the wake of that, I did create something that said "F the NRA," which I had to check with my friend. I was like, "Is this too far?" And they're like, "No, it's not. It's not too far." Because I mean, I know it makes people angry, but I'm like, you know what? I'm angry too. So we'll just be angry at each other, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah. So our time is winding down, as you can see. Last two
Okay.
questions. What's one unmarketable truth about disability that you keep saying anyway? And what reaction does it usually get?
I think the unmarketable truth is that disability is not a tragedy. Um, and I think the general reaction from the disabled public is good because they agree. Um, I think non disabled people get confused because they only know that disability is a tragedy. And I always say the circumstances surrounding disability can be tragic. Maybe it was a car wreck or, a horrible accident or an illness. And like that could be tragic. Disability in and of itself is value neutral. It's simply a way people exist. And I think that is really confusing for a lot of non disabled people who have been taught their whole lives that disability is tragic.
Mhm. Yeah. That's a good point in terms of the script, the conditioning that we come into.
Mm-hmm.
That's so all pervasive. The moment we come into this world, whether it's countries in the global north or in the global south, it seems to
Yeah.
be everywhere. The
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming message is quite negative and bleak.
Exactly. Exactly. It's very much disability is the worst thing that can happen to you. It's better to be dead than to be disabled. Like these are the messages that disabled people are fed every day. Um, Even if it's not said so blatantly, that is what we are conditioned to think.
Mhm.
And we have to it's an actual effort for a disabled person to not internalize those things.
Mhm. And that takes a lot of inner work, but it also takes a lot of healthy exposure, right? Like your
Hmm.
podcast and your advocacy activism work, and as you pointed to at the beginning of this episode, being honest, being truthful, and having the courage to really be our authentic selves,
Hmm.
even if it's really different from the mainstream mold that we constantly see in
Yep.
the movies and TV shows that we watch.
Right.
So with the next final question, and with that theme in mind, what future do you imagine, not just hope for, when disability justice becomes the standard, not the struggle?
Oh gosh. um, One thing I think that is definitely going to happen with the existence of long COVID, people, the disabled population is going to grow quite exponentially. I think over the next couple of decades. Um, right now in the U.S., disabled adults make up about 27% of the population. I think that's going to grow probably 40% maybe. I mean, it's going to grow. And I think this is going to sound like I'm wishing disability on people, but I'm not. But I do think it's a good thing because the more people who are part of the community, the more power we have. When it's so interesting because I always say, like, disability is the only community you can become a part of at any moment. You know, and so few people realize that. So few people understand that disability is literally just waiting for them. You, if you are lucky and you live long enough, you're going to become disabled. It doesn't mean that you'll have an accident or an illness. You're just going to get old. And time is the great disabler. Um, and I think that's going to help us in the long run. I hope, and I know you said, what do I see, but not hope, but it's so hard to envision what that future would look like without saying, this is what I hope for. I hope it becomes more normalized. Like, I do think we're going to see disability becoming more normalized. It's already happening. I see it in like advertising and stuff where like there'll be a casual person using a wheelchair in an ad, and I'll be like, oh, I wouldn't have seen that 20 years ago. Um, that was not normal then, and it's becoming more normalized. So I think we'll see more of that. I think we'll see more disabled people behind the scenes in creative endeavors. So maybe, hopefully, more on writing teams in writers' rooms for movies and television. Um, we're seeing that somewhat a little bit more. It takes time, and I think that's the thing. It's like it sometimes it feels so slow, but if you look for it, you can see the increase in the presence of disability in general society.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Laura. I really enjoyed our conversation. It's flown by. I can't believe
Yeah,
we're in the last minute of our conversation. Oh my goodness. And thank you again for your patience and flexibility.
absolutely. Thank you for reaching out. I'm so glad you did.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I had this conversation with you. You are clearly very knowledgeable with lots of attitude, which we love, lots of flavor.
That's me.
Um, and I know I said your handles earlier, but remind people where they can find you and your podcast and your
So,
art.
yeah, at FairyNerdy on pretty much every social media platform and at Bad Attitudes Pod on every social media platform. You can also go to the podcast website, badattitudespod.com.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. Before we time out, and have a great day. Thank you so much for letting me interview you and letting us
Oh,
have this
absolutely. Thank you.
conversation.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Of course. All right. Bye bye.
Bye
Have a
bye.
good day.
You too.